in Makanda. Margie Maestri mentioned in one of her writings last year the triple challenges of inequality, poverty and unemployment, and the pandemic of corruption, which we also heard about today quite a bit, on the rise. Somebody at Rhodes was saying, when I studied, when I was going to go to study, I couldn't go to Rhodes. It was alien to me. This was some long time ago. It was an alien place. It was too elitist. I didn't feel at home. One of the respondents was telling me that. And we also learned that in 2012, only 11 students from township schools came to Rhodes University. One of the respondents also was talking to Di and was saying that the relationship between Rhodes and Makanda is like an orange. You squeeze it and you take the juice and you leave us with the peel and the rind, but you take the juice away, which is very nicely put, I thought. And then also there has been some complaint which came out yesterday in one of the presentations as well about the fact that people thought, academics thought that the community has been over-researched, which says quite a lot about community engagement in all of those places, that there used to be very little of that, perhaps from what we've learned. These challenges are complex. So Barnett talked about complex and super complex challenges. So the complex challenges are the ones that you see in Makanda and all over the place. There's a systems and a structures overload. There are too few resources. We're getting poorer by the moment, and stress emanates from that, and the only way you can really do anything about it is to get more resources. And that is very often where we get our community engagement projects from, is looking at the challenges in the community. But there's also, Barnett said, super complex challenges. I've deliberately put that X on the second line in case you thought that was a typo, because those super complex challenges come when we have complex challenges. So when we're in stress, we get the super complex challenges. And Barnett said, we dispute the ways we make meaning of the world. We all have different ways of looking at this, and as a result, our sense of self becomes disordered, he said. We lose a clear sense of our own identity, he said, and we lose a sense of our responsibilities towards ourselves, but also towards our communities or institutions and that. Somebody from Rhodes also said, we need to double check ourselves. We need to go back and look at who we are. To see what we can do about this issue of being overwhelmed by problems, as we call them. So Barnett again, he was talking about being and becoming, like very many academics and researchers. He proposed that we need a therapeutic pedagogy, offering recovery of the self, of me, myself, but also the recovery of the community in which we're working. He called it a renewal of the human spirit. That's a sense of being and becoming. So that is what this is about, this presentation is about, really. There was a very lovely quote from an early childhood practitioner who said, I'm not going to wait for anyone, the outsider, to come inside, because I'm just doing it because it's all about the passion. And that really was a very nice thing, I thought, that statement, because she knows who she is, and she knows where she's going with that. That's what we're looking for, really, I think. Our sense of self, identity and belonging, who am I, and so on, my being and becoming, also goes with the word belonging. Where do I belong? This is very important as well. If we're not going to feel alienated from our own community or from the university or whatever, wherever we live. The way that we look at it in the early childhood field is with 4 questions with little children, and they're such lovely questions. Where do I come from? And that's all about my ancestors, my family, my community, my history, the history of my family and neighborhood. Where do I come from? Who am I? It's a question we don't ask ourselves enough about. Who am I? And where do I belong? What is my sense of belonging? To think about that question. And then after that, where am I going? Once I know who I am, where I come from, and I've acknowledged and named those parts of myself, this is linked to the big question of where do we come from? Who are we? What is our sense of belonging and solidarity? And where are we going together? And the big thing about this is that unless you do who am I, it's difficult to know who are we. And unless you do who are we, it's difficult to know who am I. So the two things work very closely together. And that, for me, in all the work that I do, which is practitioning work as opposed to academic work, really, all of that work, all of these questions to me is the nub of the issue. And the difficulty is that it takes time. So when you're doing community engagement work, you've got to spend quite a bit of time debating, who am I? And who are we? What do we want? Where do we come from? And so on and so forth. And that's how one gets a feeling of community engagement, I think. Here's another quote that I came across in a video that I think journalism people made a couple of years ago of a man who's a firefighter in Makanda. And he said, the legacy that I one day would like to leave behind is to know that all that I have done, what I could, knowing that I could make a difference in my community. But if you have a goal or a project, you always work towards achieving that. And that's how I would like to leave this place, knowing that in my time, I've made a difference. And I think that, for me, again, the whole philosophy of community engagement is knowing who I am and who we are and making a difference. So I think as human beings, we all want to think like that. What's the meaning of my life, in fact? And again, I want to say that I think in all the courses we run and in all the projects we run, this is a big question, and we hardly give time to it, really. Even to ourselves, we don't necessarily, that I'm talking about with this, with community engagement. So spirit, growing out through the cracks or the potholes of Makanda. If you look at the Oxford Dictionary and wherever else, APA and whatever, what it is the strength, our courage, our energy, and our determination. I want to make a difference. It's about, in the top one there, it's about animating in a vital force. It's a life force that you feel you've got that force of being alive. I think that's very important. It's about your mind, heart, soul, body. It's the whole of us, including our hands. What do we do? It's about our moral and our ethical sense. How are we going to first do know? People at Rhodes said the spirit enables us to collaborate with people we wouldn't normally think about for deep discussions about something, which takes me on to the next slide, which is what drives us. So Rhodes, for example, and just about all community engagement is driven by this idea, the philosophy of Ubuntu, that we've heard a lot about the last 2 days. Also an ecological view of life and the purpose of academic life. So how I put it here are the 5 pillars of Ubuntu: solidarity, or working together. Paolo, I know Tandi's doing something with water purity. Yeah, for example, so that's her challenge, but she's working with all the participants who connected to this challenge which is school children and whoever else in the community is doing that. But she also has to make relationships, the mesosystem, and connections with everybody in order to build up this communication community. And then that includes the macro system, which is all the cultural laws and the local and global ideas and people's different versions of what is right and how to do things. And then that government, and I say even with government, because in the work that I do, I find very often people want to discard government as being not useful to the project. And I keep wanting to say we can't do that. We've got to engage, even with government, as it were. We're so wanting to do things ourselves. We're so bad-mouthing other organizations that we forget this business of communication and communality, if you like. The third thing is the academic side, and I found some very interesting reading about critical thinking. So at the top there is what we all do, and academics do, and we do in the NGO world, and little children aged 5 do. They just don't call it this critical thinking, where we investigate and we find out and we question and we do research and we reason and we think about things. That is curious. Then there's also the deep thinking. We listen, especially listen for life and a living. And this is such a fabulous thing because the education for life is about the spirit, I think, about who am I, how do I fit in, who are we, who are you, how do we make a community, how are we communal within the same walls, if you like. So that is wonderful, that's education for life and a living. Some of the people who I was talking to and listening to mainly said, it's about the ethics we have. It's the Ubuntu. Somebody else said, building relationships is key. We have to discuss how we're going to do this at the beginning. Right at the beginning, we can't leave it to when there is a problem. We need to build that, and that was in the previous speaker here. That discussion was also about how do you remain transparent and open in your work. We have to discuss what we'll do at the beginning. What do we mean when we say we are doing this together? What does that mean? This is Bell Hooks, whom I didn't interview, but I read about. She said, it's about being a wholeness, a union of mind and body and spirit. And I really like that, you know, her idea of humanizing pedagogy. It's wonderful. Rhodes University, this is very interesting as well, listening to, was it Margie Maestri yesterday was giving us a history of this Makanda thing. And how it started, I was reading up about it as well, how it seemed to have started was that GADRA was started in about 1957. It was a community service organization. And then it brought in other people, the churches, community-minded people, and Rhodes people, and their main issue was malnourishment amongst young children. What are we going to do about it? So it was a service, not an engagement in those days, or a community development thing. But out of that, sort of came up, I think, the Center for Social Development, 1981, with Thelma Henderson, who developed that, also a service organization as opposed to a real community engagement thing. I used to work with them very closely and did very many fabulous things, and then more or less developed over the years to be much more community engaged in the way that we understand it. And then out of that, through the processes of there's the national systems and so on. The Senate committee here in 2008 set up community engagement, I think, and Rhodes was established in 2009, and Rhodes now is going on doing what it does, starts with the short courses. The point I want to make here is that it seems to me, from the reading I've done about it, that the process Rhodes and Rhodes has taken is a community-engaged process, that it developed in the same way as I think it was Monica Fanga was talking about earlier, about the learning trust here. The whole thing has developed and become a community-engaged sort of university, if you like, through this whole process. So the experience of Rhodes and Rhodes seems to me to be the very same experience that we all go through when we do community engagement. So what is the spirit, and how do we nurture the spirit in community engagement? And really it's about a community of practice. Oh, we've got 5 seconds left. Community of practice. And how do you do this? You make sure that, quick. Humanizing pedagogy, Paulo Freire, Hope and Timmel, Sally Hope and Timmel, and you look at education for life. It's not going to happen today. It's going to take until you die to get it right. You know, that's how we are as human beings, and we need to shine a light, that is, reflect on what we're doing all the time in a very transparent way. So we've got to say, oh, I made a mistake there. What was the effect? What harm did I do? And what did I do? And what am I going to do next? Community of practice. Then the way forward really is for the way that we run courses, workshops, whatever we call them, is not banking, which is Paulo Freire's great horror. And there's a lovely picture of banking there, of somebody pouring petrol into somebody else's head. This is Chris Hodzi, who was working in Zimbabwe in the 1985 time. And what we do instead is we identify the problem together, we interrogate the power and the social injustice, we do dialogue and critical thinking, we consciousness raising all the time, we enabling praxis, which is doing and reflecting and doing and reflecting, and then we hope to get some sort of transformation of ourselves as well as the community. The thing that I like best, and I'm nearly finished, is because I'm an early childhood person, I like play-based learning. Ludic pedagogy is called in real posh English. Ludo just means play, but play-based learning. And in the Eastern Cape, we've taken all the talk about play-based learning and we've called it ijamsi. So whatever we do should be ijamsi. Must be inclusive, joyful, active, meaningful, social, and iterative. That means that you make mistakes and you try again. So that is the process, I think, that I've found with community-engaged projects, is that you've got to do that as much as you can. Do the ijamsi method. It works very well. People like it. And when it's joyful, it doesn't mean to say you get instant joy. You know what it is if you're doing your master's or your PhD, it's not joyful necessarily until you graduate, and then you feel the joy at the end of that. So joy happens either during, in little bits, or when you've achieved. And then finally, the desired impact. I came across this man who I think is just fantastic. His name is Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. And he said, you've got to have flow. And what this means is, he talked about it being in the zone. You've got to be so focused on the joy and the passion of what you're doing in community engagement that you have a sense of ecstasy at the bottom there. You're completely involved and concentrated. You have great inner clarity about what it is you're doing and why. you have a sense of serenity, joy, you have intrinsic motivation, you really want to get this right, you're not doing it for somebody else, and you know that the activity is doable, you're not flying in the sky, as it were, and you have a sense of timelessness. That is, you don't think, oh, hush, I've got to get my thing done by Monday, and I'm going to just shortcut it. No, you do that, but you carry on after that. And then my final slide. And I'm feeling quite proud, even though I passed the red face picture. In 2023, 170 students from Makanda Township schools registered at Rhodes University, compared to the 11 of 20, whenever it was. And in 2023, the first journal was put out, and in 2025, the new postgrad diploma in higher education is going to come out. And that, I think, says a lot about community engagement. It sort of works, don't you think? Thank you.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the spirit of community engagement. Thank you so much, Margaret. No, not Irvin, please. Margaret Irvin, for such an insightful and deep and meaningful presentation around the spirit of community engagement. I'll be very strict and not allow for presentations, but we can definitely get hold of Margaret straight after tea, where we can then continue the conversation around the spirit of community engagement. Now we have a session. Venue 1 will be Flip Shoot, and then venue 2 will be Philip Ivy in Tsikana, and then in this venue, which is Atherstone, we're going to have Lutando Molepe. If you have any questions, please come and find me. But other than that, thank you so much and enjoy the next session.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Colleagues, we are going to start straight away so that we do not waste any further time, as we know that we are running behind the schedule today, but then we're still going to do what needs to be done today. It's a pleasure to welcome Flip Scooter, who's going to present on a topic titled Navigating the Landscape of Challenges and Opportunities in Community Engagement Partnership between Private Higher Education Institutes and Communities in South Africa. So thank you. Over to you, sir.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity. I must be honest here in the beginning to say that I considered to withdraw my presentation because this is such a positive conference and the vibe and everything is so positive. So I don't want to put a lot of barriers and challenges and negative thoughts on the table. But on second thoughts, I thought it's maybe important for this conference also to get the perspective and the perceptions of private higher education institutions on community engagement. And when I looked at the program, I saw that maybe, I don't know if I checked it correctly, but I'm the only one from a private higher education institution here. So that is why I decided to carry on with the presentation and to bring you this perspective. So let me just start by giving a little bit of background, because private higher education has got sort of its own history. And there's a lot of perceptions and labels around the neck of private institutions, such as that their qualifications is not on the same standard as public universities. They are only there in the market to make a lot of money because they are businesses. Their qualifications is not on the same standard. Some of them are fly-by-nights. They sell qualifications and degrees to the public. And many of these accusations are true. But there's also a shift in the tide at the moment because of the engagement of the Council on Higher Education, who is engaging with a lot of private institutions, mentoring them and putting them on a journey maybe to within the next 5 or 10 years to also get university status. So in the past, the community for private higher education was the arena where they prospect for business, where they got their clients and where they sold their corporate training to organizations in the community. But because of the whole shift, there's also a lot of private higher education institutions at the moment who are serious role players and who really want to become more trustworthy and who want to become universities and get university status. So they are serious also about a thing or a concept for them still at this stage, like community engagement. And this is why I decided to push through and give you the perspective on community engagement from a private higher education institution perspective. I'm not going to go into detail on the literature, you all know that, but just a few interesting facts maybe on private higher educations. There's a huge variety of them, and some of them offers only one program, some of them 2 or 3, some of them up to 60, 70 or 80 different programs that they offer the market then. Some of them only offers high certificates, some diplomas, some has got degrees, some even goes up to master's and doctoral degrees. So it's a very complex field of higher private higher education out there. But one of the big challenges and why they don't focus that much on engaging with communities is because a huge percentage of academics in private higher education don't have doctoral degrees. So private higher education institutions are at the moment busy with cleaning their own house. And by making sure that their staff has got the necessary qualifications to lecture. And in most institutions, because they are not allowed to call themselves universities, in most institutions there's no culture of research. So just to get academics on the standard and motivate them to get doctoral degrees and then to establish research departments is their main focus. So there's not a lot that they do in getting engaged in communities at the moment. One of their other big problems is funding, because their only source of income is tuition fees that students are paying. So there's no government subsidies and no money coming from any other source than just from tuition fees. So to keep their buildings maintained and pay their salaries doesn't leave them with a lot of other money to be spent on other types of projects. And most or all of the private higher education institutions are owned by either one owner or a lot of stakeholders and so on, and they also want to make profit out of it because it's still a business. So they cut costs to the bone. So many of the facilitators or lecturers or academics, if you want to call them that, at private higher institutions are lecturing 5 to 6 different subjects per semester to students, so they are already overcapacitated because there's no academic admin staff or secretaries or tutors or anybody to help markers or so on, so they have to do everything themselves. So if you then come and just ask them to do research and to publish, they don't have the capacity or the will to do that. So community engagement as something else on their plate is just too much asked. So the literature also show that leaders in private higher, but also in some of the public institutions, are not convinced at this stage of the importance of something like community engagement. So this makes it then a very interesting topic to research, but also a very concerning debate to enter. So just something about the methodology. I did a qualitative study, and I tried to engage stakeholders in private higher education institutions to collect my data from, and I identified 11 institutions, but from the 11 there was only 5 who had a person responsible for community initiatives. And that then became my sample, was only the 5 people that I could locate, because a lot of other institutions don't have a dedicated person for community engagement, but even the 5 that I interviewed were not dedicated only to community engagement, but they had a lot of other responsibilities as well, of which community engagement was only one thing on their table or their plate. Good. So let me share with you just some of the findings that might be interesting. And I'm not going to name the participants, but just the recurring themes I'm quickly going to highlight. And those were stuff like Our postgraduate students are anyway involved in researching problems in the workplace and other organizations and communities, and that is our form of community engagement. Another theme was funding. Our institution does not even pay our publication fees or page fees or any conference attendance. We have to pay it from our own pockets. So where will money then come from for community engagement? From time to time, we distribute blankets and foods and so on. So that is how we get engaged. One other thing that popped up was maybe we must stop getting engaged in communities and try to give more bursaries for students to come from the communities into the tertiary institution to get a good degree or qualification, because with that they can go back to the community and create jobs and prosper. One other theme that was quite interesting, and it's a perception, was that community engagement is the university's version of corporate social responsibility, and where must we get the funds from that? So funds was a thing that recurred from time to time. Two other institutions said, but our problem is we offer most of our programs in distant learning format, so it's online. Because of the size of our campus, our students are all over South Africa, all over the world in some instances, and our academics are also working from home because we don't have enough office space on campus and we don't have enough lecture rooms. So the minority of academics stays within the boundaries of the institution, so it is impossible for us to engage students or our staff in community projects. So that's roughly the data that I got. So trying to summarize that, or to get that into a proper way to enter into a discussion, if I may summarize the main themes that I got and that I think from my perspective that was put on the table is the first one is resources in terms of money and staff, capacity from staff. And then the second concern for me as a summary of the data is that a lot of people who are involved in community engagement in the privates can't distinguish between charity and corporate social responsibility and community engagement. And together with that then, I think there's a total lack of understanding of the concept engagement and what it means, because of the fact that the academics from private higher education institutions don't attend conferences like this. They are not engaged in the debate, and they are not engaged in research and in the bigger conversation. And that is the problem that we experience at the moment on the side of private higher education institutions and community engagement. So if I may make a few recommendations, and if I can take the risk to put them on the table, I would say that maybe in the first instance, a lot of development and training needs to be done with private institutions to get them engaged, to get them in the debate, and to make them part of the conversations that's going on regarding community engagement, especially around what the concept of engaged scholarship means, because I think there's a total lack of understanding regarding that concept. And then also maybe private institutions must look for other ways of funding, maybe through their alumni, or get engaged with some of the corporate organizations to whom they sell their corporate training to. Then a big need and recommendation is that they must start establishing and creating, cultivating a whole culture for community engagement, and that they must maybe enter into partnerships and collaboration with other universities, with local communities, with non-profit organizations, any form in which they can maybe get engaged within the community. So while I'm presenting this today, I'm not negative about private higher education institutions. I'm just trying to communicate that they still has got a long way to go, and that because of their focus in the past and the shift in focus at the moment, so that they are evaluated against the same criteria as public universities by the Council on Higher Education, and the whole move that they can also maybe get recognition for university status within a few years and so on, has caused a whole transformation and has set a lot of energy free, because they are also now at least starting to think about community engagement and engaged scholarship and so on. So it's still a long way to go, but at least something is moving in that area of private higher education as well. So I want to conclude and leave you actually with an invitation and with a plea for you as public universities to engage more with private higher education institutions in projects, in debates, in conversations, in research projects, and to maybe volunteer to coach and to mentor them and introduce them into what engaged scholarship means. And maybe a last thought is then for you as public institutions to see maybe a private higher education institution as part of the community in which you can get engaged to, and start assisting them to cultivate a culture and their own tradition, and to get involved in one or other way in the communities where they live. So that is then from my side, and thank you for listening to me.
Inkosi, re a leboga bayadanki. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you decided to present. Who knows, maybe there may be incentive going forward so that we could have more private institutions coming here. Perhaps they'll say there's 50 or 75% discount for you in terms of registration. I didn't say that. Okay, colleagues, questions? We can take 3 questions. There's 1, 2, third one, right at the end, the third one.
Hello, thank you very much for your can you hear me? Interesting presentation on private higher education institutions. I don't know if it's so much of a question, but more of a confusion, I think, because what we do is when we write about higher education institutions and universities interchangeably. We do not make the distinction between a private higher education institution and a public higher education institution in our writings. And there's a huge difference. Now that you've actually presented this here, you can see there's a huge difference between a public higher education institution and a private one, because a private one is more like a high school. All they come and do there then is teach, you know, and they have one secretary to cater for all of them. So that is something that we need to think about when we write this notion of higher education institutions. And then interchangeably we will say universities. And in that statement of higher education institutions, we would be including private and public higher education institutions. So that's one confusion and clarity for me. The other question is this, that if the department is preparing private institutions towards become universities, what I can see happening is that, and your plea, this is linked to your plea in the end, is that for the years that these so-called lecturers or teachers in private higher education institutions have been teaching without doing research or doing community engagement, it's like they're conditioned to that teaching mode, and it's a very difficult process to break them out of it. The reason I'm saying this is that I think, and this is no disrespect or disregard to universities of technology, because I think initially when the changes happened, for them now to actually start thinking as a university was really a huge step, and the move towards incorporating research and community engagement was actually quite difficult. So they've had the years now, and there's some fantastic work and research being done by universities of technology. So what I'm saying is that there's going to be a huge attitude problem and changing that kind of mindset from private higher education institutions to becoming a university. Yeah, so this is tied in with the culture of just doing teaching. So I think for you, this is something that people like you need to do more research to bring it out to the private higher education institutions, your research findings, because I think that would be the first step. You know, for private higher education institution personnel to actually start working with that community first. And then it makes it easier for universities that are involved in community engagement to partner with private higher education institutions. Otherwise, there'll be a huge block to work with if we had to just do it immediately. Thank you.
Yeah, the second one you can ask.
It's more of a comment and appreciation. I fully acknowledge the first presentation. It's intrinsic. It brings the spirit of activism, and it begins to address issues of decolonizing community engagement in its true sense. I was a bit touched when questions were not posed because we wanted to contribute to your presentation.
My thoughts were very long.
Oh yes, but I'm saying from, you see, it depends on which lenses you are wearing when you are talking about community engagement. The lenses you are wearing says, let's go back to basics. For community engagement practitioners, scholars, for them to triumph in execution of their work, they should have the love of it. They should understand the society for who they are. And we can't talk about community engagement without a reflection to, for lack of a better, I'm very much cautious in using my word, but without taking into context the historical context of our own communities. Are we doing community engagement as a philanthropist approach? Are we doing it as a response to triple challenges that are facing us? Or are we using communities as a reservoir of gathering information? So well, I like your presentation. It seems like as if it should be part of the journals. A different lens and a perspective of community engagement. Because it keeps on evolving, but it doesn't touch to the fundamentals. the communities that we are servicing, they remain impoverished, even after our intervention. So the work that is done, does it have an impact or not? Or is it us? I remember there was one article at some point in time where it says Fort Hare has impoverished Alice. The article was meant to say universities should be used as an instrument to change the discourse for the better. Let me stand.
Yes, sorry, but be short, please, because of time constraint.
As I go to the other presentation,
Okay.
it's fine. I always believe conferences should have ample time for engagement,
Unfortunately,
so that we can be excited. Thank you. The second presentation, the post-school higher education and training talks to a single coordinated system of higher education. I don't know why does it take so long for government to realize its own policies. Because private and community-based colleges should have been an integral part of higher education system. I will just make an example. For universities to draw students, they do not even look into private education. In fact, they don't even recognize it as a credible form of education. And that is problematic, because you cannot change the discourse, you cannot bring the vulnerable and those that are left in the periphery without recognizing this system. A child who's doing mathematics and science at a college, a private college, should be given an accreditation and an access to higher education. So there is that uniformity that we as community engagement practitioners and scholars, we need at least to support private higher education. They are the reservoir of changing the discourse economically and otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you. The last question or comment at the back, you did raise your hand. Do you still have, or are you covered? Okay, thank you. I think, is that fine? We treat that as comments. Ne? We appreciate those comments. Thank you. Yeah, I think we'll go for tea now. Thank you.